the famous tribute to your sister. It must have been, how did you write that? And did you just read what you'd written? And
I wrote something very different. I flew back, I was living in South Africa. I flew back from Cape Town overnight. Very, very sweet stewardess helping me because I was in bits. And I'm sure everyone listening to this has had to deal with very profoundly emotional moments. I like to keep busy. And I had, in those days, I had a big, thick address book. And I thought, I want to find someone who's going to make the speech for her. And I got to Z and I hadn't found anyone. Got off the plane in Heathrow, called my mother. I said, I can't think who's going to give the eulogy. And I got an awful feeling it's going to have to be me. And she said, well, it is going to be you. Your sisters and I have decided it. And on the Tuesday night, I jotted a few things down. Very traditional eulogy. Almost, she was very good at this as a child and all that. And then I thought, well, this is ridiculous. That's not who she was. And then overnight, I must have been chuntering away, and I realized that my job actually wasn't to do that, but it was almost to speak for her. And I knew I'd been left at that stage. It had no legal standing, but I knew she'd left me as guardian of her sons. Obviously, the other parent being alive, that meant nothing, but it meant something to me. That sort of duty, I think. And then I wrote it in an hour and a half, and yeah, that was it really. I did take one bit out actually, because I did give a rather unnecessary name check to Rupert Murdoch, and and I thought, why bother?
No, why give him the publicity?
Yeah.
When the world stood still that September morning in 1997, the air was thick with grief and disbelief. Princess Diana, the woman who defied royal protocol with warmth, who reached out to those the crown ignored, who carried empathy like a weapon, was gone. But as her brother, Charles Spencer, stepped up to the podium at Westminster Abbey, something monumental happened. It wasn't just a eulogy, it was a rebellion wrapped in mourning. It was a declaration that Diana's spirit would never again be controlled by the same institution that tried to tame her light. Charles Spencer didn't give a traditional royal eulogy. He gave a voice to the voiceless. He did what the monarchy never dared to do. He told the truth. He stood before the entire establishment, with the Queen, the Prince of Wales, and the entire royal machine watching, and spoke directly from the heart, raw, furious and protective. His words were not wrapped in palace-approved language. They were soaked in honesty, in love, and in pain. He said what millions were feeling but were too afraid to say, that Diana had been hunted by the press and betrayed by the very people who should have protected her. And that speech, that unforgettable, thunderous moment, is etched into British history, not because it was poetic, but because it was defiant. Charles Spencer didn't just mourn his sister, he called out the system that destroyed her peace. He said she needed no royal title to be a queen in people's hearts. That line alone shattered centuries of monarchy worship, and you could almost feel the palace walls shake. Diana's crown wasn't given by birthright. It was earned through compassion, humanity, and courage. And that, right there, was the same spirit that would later live on in her son, Prince Harry. When Charles Spencer said he would do everything to protect Diana's sons from the press, you could see the emotion in his eyes, but also the promise in his voice. He knew what that machine was capable of. He knew that if left unchecked, it would devour those boys just as it devoured their mother. And decades later, that promise still echoes, because one of those boys, Prince Harry, grew up to face the same merciless storm. The same tabloids, the same betrayal, the same ruthless obsession with tearing down a good heart. Harry, like his mother, inherited her empathy and her courage. He inherited that same refusal to play palace politics. And for that, the establishment turned on him. The same newspapers that stalked Diana from hospital steps to Paris tunnels now hunt Harry's every move, twisting his words, mocking his love, and vilifying his wife. But when you listen to Charles Spencer's eulogy, you realise this isn't new. The pattern is the same. The cruelty is the same. The only difference is that this time, Diana's son fought back. Harry's decision to leave the royal family wasn't betrayal. It was self-preservation. It was a man honouring his mother's memory, protecting his own wife and children from the same trauma that killed her. Charles Spencer promised the world he'd help shield Diana's boys from that cruelty. And while the palace may have failed that promise, Harry didn't. He carried his mother's fire, her heart, and her defiance straight out of the gilded cage. And just like his mother, he was demonized for it. Let's be real. The royal institution never knew how to handle authenticity. Diana showed emotion. They called her unstable. She spoke her truth. They called her dangerous. Harry fell in love with Meghan, a strong, confident, mixed-race woman who radiates empathy, and they called her manipulative. Sound familiar? The hatred Meghan faced was the same venom Diana endured, only this time amplified by social media and old royal resentment. And yet, through all the noise, Harry and Meghan have chosen peace over pageantry. That's not weakness. That's strength that terrifies the system. Charles Spencer's words that day, "We, your blood family, will do our best to continue the imaginative way in which you led your life," weren't just words. They were a vow. And in every way, Harry has been the living embodiment of that vow. He's not chained to titles or trapped in cold palace corridors. He's living in the sunlight, raising children who know love, not protocol. And that's exactly what Diana wanted for him. It's poetic justice that now, years later, Charles Spencer's eulogy is being revisited and celebrated, because the truth he spoke then is the truth Harry is living now. The monarchy still clings to its image, its silence, its hierarchy. But Harry and Meghan, like Diana, chose humanity over hierarchy. They chose healing over headlines. And the same establishment that once looked down on Diana for hugging AIDS patients now sneers at Harry and Meghan for their humanitarian work, their advocacy, their freedom. The irony writes itself. Charles Spencer told the world Diana was the most hunted person of the modern age. Those words haunt history and remind us why Harry's fight matters. Because he's not just defending his wife, he's defending his mother's memory. He's refusing to let her story end in tragedy. Every project he does, from mental health to Invictus Games, echoes Diana's empathy. Every time he speaks up against the press, it's Diana's voice roaring through him. That's not rebellion, that's legacy. So when we look back at that eulogy now, it's not just nostalgia, it's prophecy. Charles Spencer saw what the world refused to see, that the monarchy's obsession with control would consume everything pure if left unchecked. Diana broke free from it once, Harry broke free from it again, and both times the system responded the same way, with venom, denial, and smear campaigns. Because, you know, when you expose hypocrisy, you become its biggest threat. The British media still likes to pretend Harry betrayed his family. But, honestly, how can you betray something that never protected you? How can you betray an institution that let your mother die alone in a tunnel, chased by flashbulbs, then tried to script your grief for television ratings? The real betrayal was the silence, the cold, calculated silence that Diana's brother condemned in that abbey decades ago. the same silence. Harry refused to continue. Charles Spencer's eulogy wasn't just for his sister. It was for everyone who's ever been chewed up by power and punished for being human. It was for Diana, yes, but also for the young prince sitting beside his brother, watching the world mourn a mother he'd barely had time to know. It was for that boy who would one day grow into a man brave enough to say, "No more." And now, decades later, Harry has become the fulfillment of that promise.